G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm Rob Malicki, coming to you today from Garigal Land in Sydney.
And I'm Dirk Mulder, CEO and founder of the Koala News, coming to you from the west of Sydney on Durrag country.
Dirk, it's good to see you alive. Back on your feet.
Mate, I'm feeling much better. For those that have been following the podcast or for those that are close to me, mate, I've been down with something for the last 3 weeks and it's been horrendous. I know COVID's going around, RSV is going around, I think influenza in different forms is going around. I don't know. I reckon I've probably got a bit of a concoction of a lot of them, really. It's been dreadful, honestly.
You took the mélange, as we say, the mixture of the different bugs.
Quite possibly. But the good news is, hopefully, most of it's behind me. I reckon I'm back to 95%. So that's good.
Good to see you back up and about, mate. Yeah, look, we've got some good stuff to talk about in today's episode. Pin on the date, we're middle of August 2026. Can you believe that, man? End of the year, it feels like it's already starting to race up. I'm already working on stuff that's going to go out in November. I'm like, November 2026, where did you go?
I don't mind saying, I don't normally take vacations or holidays, but I don't mind saying the other night I was looking at my phone thinking, what can I do in December? Where can I go? What beach can I sit on for 2 weeks and not talk to anyone? It's been a big year. It's been a very big year.
Awesome. And look, we've got a big story. I want to get to your big story of the week. I literally showed this to everyone I spoke to pretty much at the Learning Abroad forum. But just because of the flow of the podcast, we've decided we're going to drop that in a couple of stories' time. Yeah, but big story coming a little bit later in the pod. What else are we covering off today, mate?
I reckon we need to have a chat about your engagement at the forum last week. Learning Abroad Forum's always a great initiative or great conference to come together and talk about one of the things that probably doesn't get the highlight of international education that it probably should. So looking forward to hearing about that. Mate, Navitas have brought out a Agent Perception Survey. It's quite long and quite in-depth, so we'll have a chat about that. Daniel Ewan, who is a great guy from Aussie House, he's written a couple of stories this week just around shorter experiences and around study tours. I want to kind of dig into that a little bit more because I think there's a lot more to that. Then we'll probably, mate, it's conference season. And then I think we need to give our friends at Study Move, Kerry Ramirez, a bit of a plug about some of their upcoming sessions because they are gold, those.
Kerry and Dimity, they're both at the Learning Abroad forum. Mate, should I give you the lowdown? Bring you inside the room of the Learning Abroad forum?
Yeah, let's kick off with that, mate. How'd it go?
Yeah, it's always so good to be back in the room with all your peeps. People don't know. I came up through Learning Abroad, basically 20 years in Learning Abroad. And our very first Learning Abroad forum was in 2005. So well before any of the other kind of forums popped up. And it started off as this kind of policy and strategy discussion, room for 30-odd people around a big table. So it was literally a kind of round table format. And then the mighty Dawn Coven basically flipped that around 2008 into an industry PD event. And since then, it's just taken off, right? So now 150 people at UCS last Thursday and Friday. So, mate, as always, mate, it's about the people, isn't it? It's like catching up with old friends and colleagues, hearing what they're going through, what they're working on. To me, that's one of the most valuable elements of this event. Sitting next to Claire Scobles from University of Queensland, and she leant over during one of the presentations and whispered, "Look at this spreadsheet I've just gotten I can't remember, Copilot to do." And honestly, this spreadsheet was to help her work through her application for fellowship with IEAA.
Yeah, wow.
And I looked at this spreadsheet, I'm just like, can I have that? And that was the thing, I'm just like, I don't need 2 days, I need 2 weeks with everybody to grab all of their little bits and tools and pieces to do things better.
Absolutely. Mate, when you say it's nice to be back with people, I really get that. And for those listening, both Rob and I are work from home type people. Our offices are in our homes. So actually getting out and remingling with people is a really big thing. And, you know, for both of us that kind of keep up to date with what's going on, we do it semi-remotely. I don't disagree with you at all. I'm out on the road next week and I can't wait to get out from behind the desk and actually catch up with people and have those discussions and just be social again in front of people. It's great. More to the point, what were some of the major topics that were covered?
Yeah, look,
and where are we sitting in 2026?
So I don't want to give it all. I've written up a little article for you, mate. You're probably in your inbox right now. People can probably read in the Koala a little bit later today, or by the time this goes to air, you'll be able to read in the Koala like the full sort of write-up about it. The theme this year was lost in translation, and was talking broadly around accessibility. So accessibility was a theme. There were some really good sessions there around how to make our information more accessibility, about neurodiversity and learning abroad, sustainability on the agenda as well. Numbers-wise, I don't know, give it to our listeners. They're here listening, so let's give them all of it. Learning abroad's kind of plateaued. Pre-COVID, we were up around 58,000 outbound Australian-based university students going and having an international study experience of some form. 58,000.
Yep.
Post-COVID, it's bounced back, and the last couple of years it's just flatlined around the sort of low to mid-40s, 42, 43,000. And interestingly, Kerry from Study Move, Kerry Ramirez, Brad Doherty from CIS Australia, both pointing to data, that number is hitting the brakes a bit. And in my article that I've sent over to you to review and decide if it's worthy of koala level publication, I talk about like the reasons behind that. And that was obviously a big topic at the forum as well, looking at what needs to happen to try and re-stimulate that growth. So if you want to hear more, learn more about Learning Abroad Forum, jump on the koalanews.com and you'll see the write-up of the Learning Abroad Forum. But yeah, look, just congratulations to all the speakers. There were some first-timers there, some people who were clearly very nervous to be in front of their peers. Mate, do you remember your first presentation?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, tell me about it.
100%.
Mate.
So the one that probably I still don't consider myself a great public speaker. I try my hardest, and I think I've gotten better over time. But mate, my first one, I still remember, I was asked to go to India, and mate, it's tattooed in my brain, right? Dr. Mahalingam's College of Engineering and Technology in Coimbatore, India, which is in Tamil Nadu. We got asked to go there just to start setting up or start the groundwork for an articulation agreement in that space. And the college were wonderful. They wanted me to come and stay the night before, so I stayed on campus, rolled out the red carpet. The next morning, I get up, have my breakfast, and go in, and there's a meeting with the president of the college. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. And mate, honestly, like you couldn't film this or set it up in your head any better. There's this long table. There's me at one end, the president at the other end, and the president's flanked with his 2 or 3, 4 advisors. And we talk, and it was a great conversation. We probably spoke for half an hour or so about studying abroad and the meaning of it and opportunities and some of the things that might work. And I think I was working for Edith Cowan at the time, so, a little bit about the standing of Edith Cowan and how that relates. And he just taps his pen on the desk and he says, how about we go and talk to some students? And I said, okay, we can do that, thinking that we would walk into a classroom, right? No, the door's open and it is a lecture theatre of probably between 1,000 and 2,000 students, nothing prepared. And up on stage is this long table with microphones, flowers, the whole 9 yards. And the president stands up and he speaks for 15, 20 minutes about welcoming me and the opportunities to study abroad. And mate, I would have been, I don't know, probably my late 20s. And I don't mind saying, oh, yeah, when you talk about nerves, luckily back in those days, I used to travel. It was a great tip from somebody, I can't remember who, but I used to travel with one of those little Spyrex notebooks, those real little flip ones. And I used to always travel with it in my top pocket with a pen. And I just thought to myself, how am I going to do this? So luckily, I pulled out my Spyrex notebook and just started writing down some of the key points that he was mentioning. And yeah, then he invited me up to speak, and yeah, luckily I probably did 15, 20 minutes on some of the things that he spoke about. Obviously at the time, just up the road in Bangalore this was an engineering and technology college, IT was a big part of it. Bangalore was taking off in terms of data centers and all of those it was the hub of the globally. But yeah, mate, I got through that one, and anytime I get nervous now, I always reflect on that and think, if I can do that, I can do this. There's nothing that's going to be worse than that situation right there. So yeah, long story, but yeah, it's one of those ones. I think everyone has, that one instance that you just go, I don't want to say broken the back of it. There's that public speaking kind of engagement that you have that you just draw upon, and yeah, that was it for me.
I do respect those people, and I love that we've got this industry event where you can do that, where you can step up. And 150 people is a lot of people, but it's also not 1,000. So it's a really good step where you're not just presenting to your colleagues at a university or to 30 students in a classroom. It's a real presentation, and we can, inverted commas, blood this new generation with some of those foundational skills that they're going to take through their whole career. So I thought that was awesome. And also shout out, I know she's an avid listener, Heidi Piper. one of our directors, she shows up to these events. So she was right at the front table. She was participating. She was active. And I just want to give a shout out to Heidi for continuously supporting the sector, because she's super busy. She doesn't have to be there, but she always shows up. Obviously for her own learning and interest, but also to give back to all of us in the room. Thank you so much for being there, Heidi.
Yeah, 100%.
Moving on. So much to talk about. Gosh. But should we talk about short courses? Maybe as a way to transition across to the big story. I think the biggest story of the week. But let's start by way of short courses.
Yeah, cool, thanks. So as I mentioned in the intro, Daniel Ewan, who's from Aussie House, wrote 2 stories this past week for the Koala around short courses. So one was about an actual study tour that came from Hong Kong. They went to Caulfield Grammar and sprinkled with lots of little anecdotes. And then he followed up with another piece that spoke more broadly about what the meaning of shorter experiences is for students who participate in those, and what the ramifications or the outcomes might be for the sector by increasing that. And long story short, it really, and I wanted to get it on the run sheet because I think this is but also a very reflective piece to be able to think about when we think about student recruitment in the current context. We think about visas, we think about government policy, we think about all of these things. If I go back to when I first started in the sector, which was probably 2003, and certainly for that next 10 years, short courses, study tours, particularly from Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, from some of those Southeast and North Asian destinations, they were massive. And they served as a great entree for students who were thinking about Australia and coming to Australia. It gave them hands-on experience. You smell it, taste it, feel it. And it's just such a good introduction to what Australian society is like, first and foremost, what it's like to be living here. And Daniel talks about making lunches before going to club, before leaving home and those sorts of things, but also the connections that are then developed, even in a high school sense. And I'll spread this out to things like exchange programs, high school exchange programs, really good way to have students experience what Australia is and what the Australian education system's like prior to making a decision about where they might study in their tertiary education. One of the things that I would, I guess, obviously say is that study tours have diminished over time, but it's a really good stop point to reflect on, are study tours and shorter term. We talked about New Colombo Plan and outbound experiences, and obviously semester-long programs have diminished over time, with shorter programs picking up in popularity. Why is that? They're quicker, they're more cost-effective. For all of those reasons, you don't disrupt your home life as much. The same applies to younger students who are offshore coming to Australia, but it plants that seed, right? And if you've had a positive experience in Australia, you've met some friends, you've developed relationships, you are comfortable in the city that you may have visited. I mean, what a great entree to then thinking about Australia as a tertiary destination. So again, probably not a massive news breaking story, but I think a really good one to sit back, think about and go, how are we recruiting students, and have we taken the foot off the gas in study tours? What's the reasons for that? And is there a way that we can invest in this space a little bit more to be able to start looking at those streams of students and start presenting options to them where I don't want to say get them hook, line and sinker, but they've had a nibble and they like what they do, and then the follow-up proposition becomes so much stronger.
You think though, because study tours time and resource intensive to run, so yeah, absolutely like sticky. But do you think, sticky in the sense, see, once people have had experience, they're more likely to come back. They want to come back for more. But do you think in this constrained environment where numbers are capped and limited, that's a viable strategy for most institutions?
Mate, it's a really good question, but it's got to form part of that mix. So what I would say is when we talk about constrained environments, normally study tours are run out of either English language centres or pathway program areas. I have no data on this, but what I would say is that when English language centres and pathway program provision was done inside of the institution, these things were much more invested in. a lot of institutions have outsourced those operations to various providers, and maybe on a ROI basis, they have been cut because there's not necessarily an immediate ROI to the provider, but the longer term ROI is really important. So I think if I can kind of rephrase or answer your question in a different way is there's short term and there's long term ROI, and I think we've probably lost vision of that long term ROI based on short term ROI, on short term profitability, if I can put it that way. So when we think about those sorts of things, these are the things that I think as institutions we need to be thinking about. It's interesting. I'm doing moderating a panel session for AIAC that's facilitated by ETS. So I hope the guys don't mind me saying this, but Sarah Todd and Tim Field were on a call as we were doing this, and Tim spoke a little bit about some of the challenges that exist at the University of Sydney at the moment. When we look at risk across visa networks, the government is talking about diversification, but do you go into new locations and invest in those locations at a time of fiscal constraint? Or do you go back into what you know, where you've got a comparative advantage? All of those questions are the questions that are going on inside institutions at the moment, and I think study tours need to be part of that conversation.
Awesome. And talking about one thing leading to another, maybe that's our segue into the biggest story in my view. When you sent this through to me, man, I was blown away by this number. So I'm just going to leave it at that and let you take this forward. Tourism, Australian tourism, which we love to celebrate. Government loves to celebrate tourism, loves to spend millions and millions of dollars on our tourism industry, and they should. But there's an important element to that, overlooked by many.
Yeah, so thanks for that lovely introduction. Yeah, look, so Tourism Australia put out their new strategic plan, which is called Tourism 2035. It's wonderful, glossy, I think 101-page document that talks about short-term tourism across areas. It talks a little bit about extracting value from those tourists and wanting longer stays, higher spends, all those sorts of things. The one thing it doesn't do, like you, when I first saw it, I just thought, are you kidding me? It makes no mention of international education as a tourism venture. If anything, it does the opposite and says that tourism actually helps international education through reverse experiences. What I will say is there were actually 5 mentions of either international education of education or students in the plan, but they in no way, shape or form had any strategic value whatsoever. And interestingly enough, I cross-referenced education spend as a tourism venture. TRA, which is Tourism Research Australia, I want to say, lists education spend in the tourism context at $15.3 billion. Now, if you take that category, that's actually the largest cohort or the largest subcategory of any tourism spend across the tourism network. So $15.3 billion and no mention of it in the tourism plan. And just again, like
increase of 23% on the year before. So of course the government wants to drive more tourism and pump the economy that way. 15.3 billion linked to Australian education. Holiday visitors spent 13.5. So the holiday people, the people arriving just for a holiday, are being outspent by people here for education purposes. And yet at the same time, no mention of it in the strategic plan. And let's face it, that whole $15.3 billion segment being undermined by government policy. These are massive numbers, Dirk. This is when you sent it to me, I was like, how is this not a headline in all of the major papers that government policy is actively working against this enormously important part of the Australian economy?
Mate, I couldn't agree more. I made a number of phone calls around this, and what seemed to be the narrative was, one was politics. So, certain people in the know certainly acknowledged that the politics of this is such that, education just didn't get a mention. The second theme, I guess, that I got was that there's a definition around what a short stay is, et cetera, and that convenient definition leaves out education. Now, so there's a view of that. Now, to me, that's an internal government definition, and you can cut the cake however you want, but at the end of the day, there's still $15.3 billion coming into this country as education spend in a tourism sense, and how that's not somehow brought into this plan, I don't know. If it is chosen to be left out, then clearly what we need to do is just put an asterisk on the last page and say international education contributes $15.3 billion. It's not included in this plan because Tourism Australia does not look after international education promotion. That's an Austrade role, et cetera, and at least there's an acknowledgement in there that that education is part of it, but it's not part of TRA, Tourism Australia's brief. The bigger question, and with the one that I fear is tied to the politics, is for me it's about funding. So if education is bringing in 15.3 bill, what's the funding on attracting that? And we've seen in the past, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we've seen in the past that Tourism Australia receives a bucket load of money. Austrade receives a penny in the dollar on that kind of funding to look after international education. From an ROI perspective, international education as a segment punches above every other category. But there is probably fear out there of highlighting that for the sake of saying, hang on a sec, we're not really spending any money on this, but yet it's bringing it all in. What's going on? So there's probably a lot more to that political onion than what we can talk about here. But the upshoot of it is not even acknowledging it in the plan, I think, is a real misstep by the government.
Yeah, just thinking about it and just thinking, when do you develop a strategic plan that doesn't address your most significant segment? What do we call that, Dirk?
Mate, I agree. I don't know.
We call it stupidity.
I don't
call it dangerous.
I don't want to put a label on it, Rob.
Dangerous?
I mean, I mean, there's lots of words that you could put to it. Is it mismanagement? Is it oversight? I don't think it's oversight. Everyone knows what the situation is, or one would expect that everyone knows what the situation is right across government departments in this space. But it's certainly a strategic decision to frame it the way that it has been. And yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't fall our sector's way, and it doesn't probably, in my view, it's not fully transparent, which is the difficult thing.
Are you aware of any interaction between, I don't know who would hold those conversations, but IEAA, for example, International Association of Australia, talking with Tourism Australia, like any sort of conversation saying, hey, we are the peak body for international ed, or Universities Australia could be that role, talking with Tourism Australia?
Look, not from that point of view. I would imagine, not from a sectoral representation point, I would imagine that there are lots of conversations going on between Austrade and Tourism Australia, and a lot going on in that. And I know there have been in the past. I don't know what's currently going on, but I know that there have been in the past. I know if we think about Austrade's submission to one of the reviews that was done a couple of years ago, I can't remember which one it was, the review of international education and tourism, I think it was. If you look at that submission, it clearly identifies education as a massive tourism spend, and the ROI based on that, again, funding-wise, very different. So, look, there are people around that understand this, and I'm sure that there are people on the education side of the fence in Austrade that are putting their hand up and saying, hey, I think Tourism Australia is a very strong political body, and how much headway or what those conversations are behind closed doors, I couldn't comment on, but I would imagine that there are conversations going on.
Seems like there's opportunity there, right? Get us on the radar of other people in other places.
Yeah, again, and look, mate, if you take the helicopter up a couple of thousand feet and you look across, we're having a conversation that's based on migration, and international education's tied to that. There's a lot of benefits that international education bring that aren't being brought into that discussion. So if we're just looking through the migration lens and all we're wanting to do is cut migrants, and again, for me, the conversation is, let's look across that NOM and look at the different categories. We've got New Zealand citizens, we've got international students, we've got graduate visa holders, we've got working holiday makers. There's a plethora of categories across that. Why aren't we looking at what are the characteristics of each of those subgroups for students? Are they an impost on housing? We've got data now that tells us that they are an impost on housing, but not to the levels that we might expect from other categories. What do they bring into the country? What's the benefit that comes in? I don't think we've had that strategic conversation across that NOM category, across those NOM categories, to say, if this group is a net benefit to the country and they are minimally resource intensive, why are we cutting visas in that space? What about another group that might be here that are much more housing intensive, which seems to be where the conversation is at the moment, right? Around housing availability, around cost of living, all of those things. And then being able to say, hang on a sec, they're much more intensive in that space. let's actually look at that category in more detail. Last week, we've had, I think, Matt Canavan talk about migration, not wanting to cut working holidaymaker visas because the farmers would get their heckles up. So I guess what I'm saying is we're having this conversation that's driven by a sense of migration is a bad thing at the moment because of cost of living and housing pressure, but we're not having a strategic conversation about that. It's just migrants are bad and migrants are taking away from our lifestyle. Again, in many categories, I don't think that's the case. And the data seems to support that, but yet the positive data on international education seems to be being dampened as we cite here in the tourism space, and the negative things seem to be blown up as much as possible. So we're not having an accurate conversation, and all that will lead to is mismanagement over the medium term, in my opinion.
Moving on, results of Navitas Agent Perception Survey for 2026 out. Yeah, some big findings in this one. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, so
surprising in some ways,
absolutely.
Unsurprising in others.
Yeah, so let me rephrase. Firstly, congratulations to John Shue, the Chief Insight Officer at Navitas, and his team for putting together such a comprehensive, document and comprehensive survey. I think there were 800 and something odd agents surveyed across 64 countries. No mean task there. The document that has come out has 4 parts to it. John and I had a chat late last week, and I said to him I'd look into it. What I've decided to do was actually come out with a story for each of those parts, and so I'm releasing a story a day this week around that. So by the time this goes to air, those 4 parts will be up. I highly recommend anyone who's in particularly the recruitment/management spaces within international education to have a read of those stories and then actually download the Navitas document and go through it in a lot more detail. Certainly in a story, I can't capture the depth of data that is in the actual document, but to cover it off, there's 4 parts. The first part is the Big Four lose their grip as visa uncertainty reshapes global demand. Probably don't need to talk too much more than the heading on that one because,
pretty obvious. But
what it does do is underpin the rationales for that and provides data to support it. And I think having that full view on that is really important. The second part is cost pressures push students towards cheaper, closer, and more predictable options. So again, cost of living right across the world is changing. Traditional destinations are becoming more expensive. Alternate destinations are shaping. So we now see local options, we now see intra-regional options, and we might see options which might be outside the region but are still closer to home than the 4 major destinations. So again, cost pressures are pushing those. Part 3 is a change in student outlook where students are building portfolios of options as T&E and home country studies surge. So again, when we look at ROI and when we start looking at when students are actually applying, they're not just applying to 3 institutions in Australia anymore because Australia is where my dream is. They might be applying to 1 in Australia, 1 in Canada, and then maybe one is somewhere, and then their 4th option might be a T&E program in their home country. So there's this portfolio now of developing alternate options which aren't having all their eggs in one country's basket or one destination's basket. Part 4 is how AI hasn't replaced education agents, it's made them more essential. And actually, look, they're all really good parts, but this one I found really fascinating because, for the last 20 years that I've been in here, you talk to vice-chancellors and you talk to deputy vice-chancellors and we need to recruit more students directly and cut out agent costs and do this and do that. That viewpoint has merit, right, from an institutional point of view, but it hasn't decreased the role of an agent over time. If anything, the AUIDF benchmarking surveys seem to indicate that agent usage has either plateaued or actually has increased over time. I remember being back probably, and I think I want to say off the top of my head, 65% maybe 10 years ago were used the help of an agent. I want to say that's now up to 75, 80%. So the agent is a really important role in the nexus of international education and having students move from their home country to their destination country. Now, the role that AI is continually placing, and I paraphrase this in one sentence because, again, this is a much longer piece, and again, highly encourage people to actually read the story and then read the document. But essentially, AI students are walking agents officers, much more prepared than what they ever have been, but localized and trusted advice still trumps what you can pull out from AI. So they're walking in and they're having the first up conversation isn't just, oh, I want to go to Australia. tell me what my options are, the first up conversation is, I've researched this. I know that the University of New South Wales is ranked number 1 in Australia. Melbourne's ranked number 2, et cetera, et cetera. I know that, I don't know, Melbourne has AFLs, Sydney has rugby league. There's a much more detailed conversation going on around what those options look like, but having the agent on board to assist with honing those, and then also being able to guide through what is a visa system which is becoming more and more complex, has more and more question marks around it, and more uncertainty, is probably where the agent steps into their own and really exerts value in that proposition.
Someone I was talking to at the Learning Abroad Forum was saying to me, "Oh yeah, you've now got students that are arriving at expositions, arriving at a table with personalised spreadsheets, personalised PowerPoint presentations, with the pros and cons of particular institutions and how it aligns with them and how it doesn't." And of course, that's a challenge for a recruiter, someone on the grounds, to look at it and be like, okay, where am I adding my value? And I guess agents are facing the same challenge. It's like in a world where information is now a commodity, everyone has information. What is the value that you're adding? And just looking at this, I've got this report up on my other computer as we're chatting. But for example, since 2023 to 2026, this is agent reported, of course, but the question is, students have an increased need for social and mental health support. People responding affirmatively to that question in 2023, 62.9%. This year, 82.3%. So we see the role, just in that, like 20% jump, percentage point jump in mental health support. The role still remains essential, but it changes. It's not just information provision. It's now about, I am your guide. I am your support service. I'm the person you call when you need help to make this happen when the government rejects your visa, even though you qualify and meet... Oh, sorry, end rant. Off soapbox, Rob. We're done. Great report. I've just downloaded the summary. Ladies and gentlemen, on the Navitas website, well worth a look. Just Google name and the articles, of course, on the koala to break it down for you. Maybe as we get towards closing, you were saying at the top, we're heading into conferencey season, and there's that, and we've got some of the workshops coming up too with Study Move.
Mate, there's so much going on over the next couple of months. So the ones that I pulled off for our running sheet, just of the major ones, we've got the ISANA conference. ISANA obviously is a student support organisation. They're at the Metropolis in Melbourne from the 8th to the 9th of September. Then the week later, roughly, or maybe a week and a half later, English Australia will be at the Pullman East Melbourne, and that's from the 16th to the 18th of September. And then, of course, at the end of October, we have AIEC. All through that, there's a sprinkling of IEAA, professional development / forum events. There's no shortage of opportunity for discussions around where parts of our sector and those involved in our sector in specialty ways can get together and sharpen their pencil. So it's amazing. Then, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned at the top, one of the ones that I'm looking forward to next week is, at the end of this week, should I say, and by the time this goes to air, we would have missed the Australian one, but Study Move, as you say, Kerry and Dimity. I love these sessions because they're so data rich. And being I don't want to say a data nerd, but I'm moving towards that way. And the way that Kerry breaks it down, and it's just superb. So I think if you can get along, absolutely have a look at those. Pardon me. So the Australian data session is being held on the 20th of August, and unfortunately you would have missed that by the time you listen to this. Even as an Australian university, I would say if you've got an hour to spare, log on to the New Zealand session. And for those in New Zealand, again, this is a must, I think, for you guys, but even from an Australian or even internationally, jump onto the New Zealand session because I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation with the way that New Zealand's been growing, the way New Zealand's been taking their education offer to the world, and it's being held on the 25th of August. So there's plenty of time to register for that one. Again, I think, like I said, the way Kerry breaks this down, it's just such a great session to walk through what's actually happening by the numbers. So yeah, big raps on that.
Make an observation. Kerry and Dimity, the two sides of Study Move, have made being a data nerd cool. Can I just say that?
They have.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. You've got the legends like Rob Lawrence and the legend himself, Alan Olsen, who were the original data is cool people, but I don't know, Kerry and Dim have brought it to the masses. So good on you guys. And open invitation. You are welcome on this podcast anytime. I keep hassling them every time I see them that they need to join us on the pod at some point. So we will keep trying.
Absolutely. To register for those, jump onto thekoalanews.com. There is a story there that was published this morning, the 18th, and it's about study move data sessions, and there's a registration link for both of those.
And of course, registrations are open for the AIEC conference. This is the one not to be missed, the 40th anniversary taking place in Sydney in October. Dirk, we've already got our accommodation booked. We're going to be there, so if you're not there, we would be most disappointed to miss your presence. We still have early bird tickets on sale, so jump on aiec.idp.com. And of course, lots of stuff coming out on the Koala News this week. So those stories around Navitas. Sorry, Mark, I cut you off. Looked like you had something to chip in there.
Oh, no, mate, maybe the moment's lost. I was just going to say, for those listening and who may not know, for the last 2 years, Rob and I have got an apartment, a two-bedder apartment, and Rob is the apartment finding guru. And for the last 2 years, he has found amazing places, big reputation to live up to, and I look forward to reporting on what the quality of this one is. It looks good on paper, though.
Yeah, awesome. So I look forward to seeing you in Sydney. And of course, thekoalanews.com for all of your international ed stories. Some big ones dropping this week. More deep analysis of those results out of the Navitas Agent Perception Survey and much, much more, as always. Dirk, thanks so much for keeping us up to date. Anything else? What's up for you for the week ahead?
I am off to the Northern Territory middle of next week. So Wednesday I fly up to Darwin. I'm working on, and I hope it comes off, all indications is it is, but Minister Robin Cahill I'll be sitting down with to do a pod for you. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm currently tic-tac-toeing with their media team at the moment with questions and I guess a pre-brief as to what the podcast is about and how we go about things. So I'm really looking forward to that, and should be a really good expose into not just how the Northern Territory is developing, evolving, but I'm hoping to get some really good grabs around what makes the NT different and how unique they are in the current settings. So looking forward to that.
So, mate, we'll see you in the next podcast episode in a couple of weeks, and we'll debrief everybody on that. See you next time, folks.
Thanks, Rob.